Elena Cross found my story in the archive, but tonight it will be my voice you hear because silence has lasted too long, and my silence has teeth. I was not born for revenge, but revenge was carved into me the night my sister, Anna, entered St. Clement's Hospital with a fractured arm and left in a coffin, because negligence wrapped in arrogance killed her faster than the bone ever could. The doctors dismissed her pain, the interns ignored the swelling, and the surgeon signed off without even looking, and by morning an infection had spread through her blood, unmonitored, untreated, because the night nurse was covering 3 wards while the chief physician drank scotch in his office. I was told later that her death was unavoidable, a tragic complication, but I had read enough, seen enough to know lies when they dressed as explanations. My family begged for answers, but the hospital board sealed files, denied fault, and wrote her name into their silence, a silence I could not endure, so I became the sound beneath it, patient, waiting. I am Clara Monroe, and I was 24 when Anna died 25 when I started haunting the halls of St. Clement's, not with chains but with questions filing applications for records. They misplaced visiting departments they said were closed, pressing doctors whose eyes darted away from mine. I worked as an assistant in medical archives, shelving charts while memorizing the codes that hid the most dangerous truths. And slowly the pattern unfolded. Patients who had been misdiagnosed, signatures missing from critical reports, families told their loved ones had been beyond saving, when in fact they had been left unattended for hours. Anna's case was not an accident. It was a symptom of something deeper, a culture of profit and prestige that treated patients as paperwork. And at the heart of it was Dr. Adrian Cole, the chief surgeon, a man celebrated at conferences and praised in journals, whose charm could melt reporters, but whose negligence cracked bones and drained lives. Every file I touched, every whisper I overheard, seemed to lead back to him. And yet the more I uncovered, the more I realized he was not alone. The hospital board was his shield. Wealthy men and women who dined in quiet rooms while covering malpractice with forged reports and settlements buried under non-disclosure clauses. They traded silence like currency, and for years I played their game, collecting fragments, copying documents late at night, piecing together a shadow archive that told the story they wanted erased. I met others along the way, mothers who had lost children, husbands who had buried wives, interns too afraid to speak, and each one handed me another shard of truth. I stitched them together into a blade, though I kept it sheathed, because timing is everything, and vengeance cuts only once. Still, patients gnawed at me, and each time I passed the hospital doors, I saw Anna S.'s face in every pale sheet wheeled away, and I whispered that I had not forgotten. For years I endured, until finally a case broke the silence from within. A young boy named Isaac who died after a simple appendectomy went septic. His chart altered hours after his death. His parents offered hush money by a trembling administrator. I obtained the original notes, the unedited vitals, the timestamp that proved neglect, and suddenly my archive was no longer fragments but fire. I leaked pieces to regulators, planted questions in the ears of journalists, and for the first time St. Clement's trembled under scrutiny. But Adrian Cole stood untouched, smiling in interviews, blaming systemic issues while polishing his awards. That was when I knew destruction on paper would never suffice, because some men are carved from arrogance too thick to burn in daylight, and only the dark can consume them. So I studied him the way I once studied files, charting his movements, learning his rituals. He left the hospital late, but not always for home, often stopping at the same private bar 2 streets away, his coat folded neatly, his glass never empty, his admirers circling like moths. He believed himself untouchable, and arrogance is the sweetest weakness. I waited, watching, learning the cadence of his steps, the times he was alone, the nights when even shadows seemed to sleep. I prepared not just evidence, but execution, because vengeance is not a rumor, it is a verdict, and mine had been waiting too long. The night came on a rain-soaked Thursday when the streets glistened like glass, and Adrian Cole left his bar later than usual, his body heavy with drink, his keys fumbling in his hand. I followed at a distance, each step echoing the weight of years, until he entered the hospital's staff lot, deserted and silent. There I confronted him, my name cutting through the rain like a scalpel. He turned, confused, amused even, because men like him always laugh before they beg. I told him who I was, who Anna was, what he had done, and his smile faltered though he still tried to brush me off, calling me hysterical, calling my sister weak, until I opened my bag and spilled the files onto the wet pavement, pages bleeding ink in the rain. Everyone a ghost with his name written across it. His eyes flicked over them, widening, his voice stuttering now as denial cracked under proof, but still he clung to arrogance, muttering about lawyers, about the board, about protection. I stepped closer, blade in hand, not hidden but gleaming under the pale lot light, and for the first time fear colored his face, real and raw. He begged then, begged for mercy, for silence, but I had carried silence too long, and silence had teeth now, and those teeth were mine. I struck once, deliberate, the blade sinking through fabric and flesh, his gasp lost in the storm. His body crumpled beside the files, his blood mixing with the rain, the pages soaking it until truth and consequence became one. I stood over him, calm, steady, not triumphant but balanced, as though a scale had finally leveled after years of tilting. I whispered Anna's name into the rain, told him silence remembers, told him every patient he buried would haunt his last breath. Then I left him there, among the ghosts he had created, the storm carrying away his last words, the hospital lights flickering in the distance like indifferent eyes. By morning, his empire of silence would begin to collapse, scandals unsealed, whispers turned to headlines, and though they would never trace the blade, they would know justice had come, not from courts, but from memory. Now I return to my own silence, not as a victim, but as a curator of stories the world wants to bury. I have become an archivist of pain, of debts unpaid, and my ledger is not yet full. Anna's name is no longer drowned, but others remain, countless others, and I will not rest until each one is remembered. Silence is patient, silence is endless, and I am silence given voice.